Mama, I can't afford the next dose of medicine for Lily Rose. They won't give it to me without payment. That's why I'm calling. I don't know what to do anymore. Could you lend me one more time? It's $2,800, Mama. I just don't know when I can pay you back. Those were the words that cut through Dante Ferraro like a blade he didn't see coming. He was standing in the hallway of his own penthouse in Tribeca, Manhattan, coming back from a meeting that got canceled at the last minute, when he heard a voice slipping through the bathroom door. He wasn't trying to listen, but that voice, low, broken, ashamed of asking, it passed through the walls like there were no walls at all. Dante stopped. He just stood there, right outside the bathroom, car keys still in his hand. The voice kept going. He recognized it. It was Maya, the cleaning woman who'd been working in his penthouse for 8 months, always on time, always quiet, never once complained about anything. And now she was whispering in the bathroom, crying with shame, asking her own mother to borrow money to pay for her daughter's medication. Dante was 36 years old. He'd signed a $40 million deal that same week. And right there, just a few feet away from him, a young woman couldn't come up with $2,800 to keep her 2-year-old daughter breathing. $2,800. He thought, how does someone not have $2,800? He stared at nothing for a few seconds. Something small started rising inside his chest. Something he hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't pity. It was something different. It was the memory that there's suffering in this world that no amount of money warns you about before it shows up at your door. And what he'd do in the next 24 hours would change Maya's life forever. And his too. But right then, he didn't know that yet. Nobody did. If this story already got under your skin, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, let's go back to that hallway in Tribeca, where Dante Ferraro was still standing with his keys in his hand, and a decision forming in his chest that he couldn't yet put into words. Dante turned and stepped away from the bathroom door as quietly as he could, then made his way down the hallway toward the study at the far end of the penthouse. He wasn't in a hurry, but his mind had already begun to move. That was how Dante Ferraro operated, always. Numbers, logic, problems, solutions. He didn't know how to feel before he analyzed. He analyzed first, felt later, if he felt at all. He sat down in his chair, opened his phone, and called Reed Calloway. Reed answered after 2 rings. His voice was as calm as ever, ready for anything, because 20 years of working beside Dante had taught Reed that every call could mean absolutely anything. I need information on the cleaner working at the penthouse. Her name is Maya Santos. Everything you can find. Salary, contract, circumstances, whatever is in her file. Reed went silent for a second. In 8 months, Dante had never once asked about any household staff member. Not once. All right, give me an hour, Reed said, then hung up. While he waited, Dante's other phone vibrated. The private line. Franco Benedetti was on the other end, his voice low and heavy, carrying the kind of tension that only lived inside calls made after midnight or when something had happened at the port. The shipment in Newark was stopped. Customs is holding 2 containers. Someone on the inside says this wasn't a random inspection. Dante didn't change posture. His voice was flat, cold, precise as a surgical blade. Call Donovan. Tell him he has 4 hours to fix it. If it isn't fixed in 4 hours, I'll deal with it another way. Franco understood. The call ended in less than a minute. Dante set the phone down. 2 worlds. On one side, a shipment worth millions of dollars being held at the port. On the other, a girl crying in his bathroom because of $2,800 in medicine. He handled the first world with a single phone call. The second was one he still didn't know what to do with. Exactly 1 hour later, Reed sent a message. The file was brief, precise, pure Reed. Maya Santos, 27 years old, registered address in Hunts Point, Bronx. Works 3 jobs. Cleans Dante's penthouse from Monday through Friday during the day. Washes dishes on the night shift at an Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. On weekends, does laundry for a shop in Queens. Estimated total income, around $3,200 a month. Dante kept reading. Daughter's name, Lily Rose Santos, 2 years old, born premature at 28 weeks, diagnosed with bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Currently being treated at Mount Sinai under the care of a pediatric pulmonary specialist. Medicaid covers appointments and some basic testing, but the specialized medication and the monthly cost of renting a portable breathing machine aren't included in the approved coverage. The baby's out of pocket, Medical expenses alone come to around $2,800 a month. Rent for a studio apartment in Hunts Point, $600. Food, transportation, diapers, formula, and basic living costs, another $600. Total monthly expenses, approximately $4,500. Income, $3,200. Short by $1,300 every month. Every month. Dante stared at that number. 1,300. He looked at it the way he looked at a problem whose answer was impossible. She had been doing this math for 8 months. 8 months of coming here every day, on time, silent, wiping every pane of glass, arranging every pillow, saying, "Good morning, Mr. Ferraro," in a calm voice, as if her life was fine, as if her daughter at home was fine, as if everything was fine, and he had never seen it. Never once asked. He closed the phone, sat still in the study, city light spilling through the glass, the roar of New York rising below but never reaching this room. He thought about the way she had said "mama" in the bathroom, the way her voice had broken on that word. He thought about the number 2,800. Then he thought about the 40 million he had signed for that very week. And he realized something painfully simple, something he had forgotten a long time ago. There were people in this world fighting every single day against numbers he would never have to think about, and she was one of them. But he had never even asked for her daughter's name, had never asked anything at all. Everyone in their place. That was how it worked. She had been invisible to him, but that was about to change. 15 minutes later, Dante heard the bathroom door open. He had heard the water running before that. She had washed her face. He knew that because he had washed his own face too after calls no one was ever supposed to know about. He rose from the desk, stepped into the hallway, and stood there with his back against the wall in a way that looked natural, as though he had just happened to pass by. But nothing was ever accidental with Dante Ferraro. It never had been. Maya stepped out. Her eyes had been washed, but they were still red. The kind of red cold water couldn't erase. The kind that came from somewhere deeper. She was holding the cleaning cloth in her hand, gripping it tightly, as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. When she looked up and saw Dante standing there in the hallway, she stopped. Her whole body stiffened for a second. He saw it immediately, the way her shoulders drew up, the way her eyes dropped and then shifted away, the way her fingers tightened even more around the cloth. He recognized that expression. He had seen it on the faces of many people, in many different rooms, over many years. It was the face of someone waiting for bad news, waiting to be dismissed. "Good morning, Mr. Ferraro," she said in the most normal voice she could manage. "I didn't know you were home today. The meeting was canceled," he said shortly. Then silence settled for a beat. Not long, but long enough for her to brace herself for whatever was coming next. "I need to ask you something." Her eyes lifted to his. There was fear in them that she hadn't managed to hide in time. She was thinking about next month's hospital bill, thinking about Lily Rose, thinking about how much bigger that monthly shortfall of $1,300 would become if she lost this job. "Which hospital is treating your daughter?" The question hung in the air. Maya blinked. Twice, as if she had just heard a language she wasn't sure she understood correctly. She stood there, lips slightly parted, unable to say anything for a few seconds. Then she spoke very softly. "Mount Sinai. What's the doctor's name?" "Dr. Helen Park. Pediatric pulmonology." Dante gave a faint nod. "What medication is she on?" Maya swallowed. "Budesonide and albuterol when she has an episode." She answered each question like someone being interrogated, her voice trembling lightly, not understanding why this man was asking these questions, not understanding where he was going with them, only knowing that he was asking, and she had no right not to answer. Dante took his phone from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. His fingers moved across the screen for a few seconds. She stood there watching him type, not daring to breathe too hard, not daring to ask what he was doing, not daring to hope for anything, because hope had betrayed her too many times already. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked her directly in the eyes. "I overheard your conversation in the hallway, Maya. I know about the $2,800. He paused for a second, then simply said, "All right." Then he turned and walked back toward the study without explaining anything else, without saying another single word. Maya remained there, alone in the hallway, the cloth still in her hand. She didn't dare ask what all right meant. She had lived long enough to know that when something sounded too good, the safest thing to do was not believe it until it had truly happened. She drew in a deep breath, tightened her grip on the cloth, then turned back to work, wiping down the kitchen counter, straightening the sofa cushions, vacuuming along the hallway. Everything like every other day, as if nothing had just happened. But what was going to happen on Monday at Mount Sinai was something she had never prepared for. No one had. Not even Dante himself had expected that he would go that far. Monday came. Maya woke at 5 o'clock in the morning in the studio apartment in Hunts Point. Lily Rose was still asleep in the old crib, set beside the bed, her tiny breathing moving through the portable ventilator beside her, the machine humming in a steady rhythm like the ticking of a clock Maya had heard so often that if it stopped in the middle of the night, she would wake instantly. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched her daughter sleep. Today was the follow-up appointment at Mount Sinai. She already knew what was going to happen, or at least she thought she did. The unpaid bill, $2,800 times 2 overdue months, plus the equipment rental, bringing the total to nearly $6,000. She didn't have $6,000. She didn't have $600. Last week she had sold plasma twice just to have enough money to buy diapers and food for Lily Rose. And for 3 nights in a row, her own dinner had been water and 2 slices of bread left in the cabinet. On the bus ride from the Bronx to the Upper East Side, Maya held Lily Rose on her lap, the little girl still half asleep, her head resting against her mother's chest. Maya looked out through the window. The city was waking up. People heading to early jobs moved fast along the sidewalks, coffee in hand, headphones over their ears, every one of them on the way to somewhere. Maya was going somewhere too, but she was going there to hear a sentence she had spent the whole night teaching herself how to survive. "We're very sorry, but if the bill isn't paid, the treatment program will have to be suspended." She had heard that sentence in her head 100 times. She had prepared for it. She had made a plan. If they stopped treatment, she would find a free clinic in the Bronx. She would ask the doctor for sample medication. She would find a way. She always found a way. But when she stepped up to the reception desk in pediatric pulmonology on the 7th floor of Mount Sinai and handed over Lily Rose's insurance card and paperwork, the woman behind the desk looked at the screen, then looked up with an expression Maya couldn't read. "Miss Santos, your bill has been paid." Maya didn't react. She just stood there. Her eyes were on the woman behind the desk, but she wasn't truly seeing her. "In full," the woman continued, "including the next 6 months of treatment, medication, equipment rental, follow-up fees, total of $22,800, paid in full." Maya blinked. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Who paid it? Her voice was so small that even she wasn't sure whether she had said it out loud. "I'm not allowed to disclose the payer's information, but there was a card left for you." The woman handed Maya a small white envelope. Maya took it with a trembling hand. Inside was a white card with no name, no logo, only a single handwritten line. The handwriting was slanted, sharp, quick, the kind of writing used by a man accustomed to signing documents where every signature was worth millions of dollars. Maya recognized that handwriting. She had seen it hundreds of times on the papers lying across the desk she dusted every day, for Lily Rose. No repayment, no thanks needed. Maya sat down in one of the waiting chairs, slowly, as though her legs could no longer hold her up. Lily Rose was in her arms, her head against her mother's chest, knowing nothing, and Maya cried. Not the crying she hid in the penthouse bathroom, not the kind where she bit her lip and swallowed every sound back down. This was a different kind of crying, the crying of someone who had prepared for the worst and received something she hadn't even dared to dream of, the kind of crying that shook her shoulders, shook the hands holding her child, shook loose from a place deep in her chest that she had locked away a very long time ago. The people sitting around her in the waiting area looked over. An older mother sitting beside her reached out and gently patted her back without saying a word. Because there are certain kinds of tears that words only make smaller. At that same moment, in the Tribeca penthouse, Dante sat in his study with a phone to his ear. Franco Benedetti was on the other end. Dante's voice wasn't the voice of a man who had just done charity. It was the voice of command. "The little girl's name is Lily Rose Santos. She's being treated at Mount Sinai. Pediatric pulmonology. Dr. Helen Park. I want her prioritized. No waiting list. No being passed from one department to another. The best doctor, the best appointment schedule. Can you make that happen?" Franco was silent for 2 seconds. He had worked with Dante for 20 years. He had arranged things far bigger than this, things no one ever spoke about in the light. A little girl in a hospital wasn't difficult, but he heard something in Dante's voice that he hadn't heard in a long time. It wasn't pure command. There was something else underneath it, buried carefully, but he heard it. "Who is this little girl that you care about?" Franco asked quietly. Dante fell silent. "Just do it." Franco didn't ask again. He knew when to stop. And that was how Lily Rose Santos, 2 years old, the daughter of a cleaning girl from Hunts Point, was quietly placed on the priority list of one of the largest hospitals in America through the power of a man she had never met. But good news always travels fast. It moved from Maya to Rosa through a tear-soaked phone call that same afternoon. From Rosa, it spread through family stories she told with open, heartfelt gratitude. Because when goodness arrives, human instinct is to tell the people we love, and it was going to reach the ears of one person Maya prayed every night would never come back. Maya didn't leave the penthouse that day. When the cleaning was nearly done, she stood at the door of Dante's study, where he was sitting in front of his laptop screen, the blue light spilling across his face. She stood there for a while before he noticed. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her stomach, the posture of someone gathering every piece of courage she had to say something she had held inside for far too long. Dante looked up. "Can I tell you something?" He noticed it immediately. "She used you. Not Mr. Ferraro. Not Sir." For the first time in 8 months, she let that distance fall away. He nodded. She stepped inside, 1 step only, then stopped. She didn't sit down, even though there was a chair in the room. She remained standing, her hands still clasped in front of her, and began to speak. Her voice was calm, not dramatic, not trembling, calm in the way of someone who has lived with pain for so long that it has become ordinary truth. "My father was shot to death when I was 12. He owned a small grocery store in the South Bronx. One night, someone came in to rob it. He had nothing but $400 in the register. They shot him over $400. I was at home, 2 blocks away, and I heard the gunshots, but I didn't know those were the shots that killed my father until the police knocked on the door." Dante stopped typing on the keyboard. "My mother worked 4 jobs to raise me and my brother. She had cervical cancer. They found it too late because she didn't have insurance, didn't go for regular checkups, and didn't have time to be sick. She survived against the odds, but she was never the same again. I was in my last year of nursing school. I dropped out to take care of her. I never found my way back." Maya paused for a moment, not to catch her breath, but to get through the next part. "Lily Rose's father was named Derek. He left when I was 6 months pregnant. In a text message, 4 words, 'I'm not ready.' He didn't call back. He didn't come back." She said it the way someone reads a line from a newspaper, no longer able to hurt in any new way because it had already hurt in every way possible. Lily Rose was born premature at 28 weeks. She weighed less than 1 kilogram, 47 days in the neonatal intensive care unit. I slept in a hospital chair for 47 nights in a row. There were nights when I looked at my daughter through the glass of the incubator and didn't know whether she'd still be there the next morning." Dante sat still. He didn't interrupt her, didn't nod to perform sympathy. He only looked at her. Truly looked at her. The kind of look Maya clearly wasn't used to receiving. The bill for the neonatal intensive care unit was $380,000. Medicaid covered most of it, but there are still $22,000 in unpaid debt. Every month I get a collection notice. Every month I put it in the drawer because I don't have the money to pay it, and I don't have the time to be afraid." She kept going without stopping, as if she knew that if she stopped, she wouldn't have the strength to continue. "I skip dinner 4 nights a week. I only eat properly here, in this penthouse, on the days I work, because there's food in the refrigerator here, and you allow the staff to use it. That's why I haven't taken a single day off. Not because I'm hardworking, because on the days I don't come here, I don't eat." Dante felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't pity. He didn't do pity. It was something else, something older, something deeper. It pulled him backward to a night 5 years earlier, the night his phone vibrated, and Isabella's name appeared on the screen, his sister calling, and he watched her name tremble on the table while the meeting kept going. And he thought, tomorrow. There had been no tomorrow for Isabella, and now he was sitting here, listening to Maya speak, and he was listening. He heard every word. Maya looked straight at him. "I'm not telling you these things to ask for anything more. You've already done more for my daughter than anyone has ever done for us. I'm telling you because you heard my phone call that day, and you deserve to know what it was you heard." The study fell silent. City lights flickered behind the glass. Dante said nothing, not because he had nothing to say, but because what she had just said didn't need a response. It needed to be heard, and he had heard it. Maya gave a small nod, turned, and walked out of the room, softly the way she had walked in. She closed the door behind her so gently that Dante didn't hear it shut. He sat there, alone. The laptop screen was still glowing, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at the place where she had just stood, and for the first time in a very long time, Dante Ferraro felt that this penthouse was too large for one man. But just when Maya thought that maybe, just maybe, life was giving her a little room to breathe, there would be a knock at the penthouse door. The person standing there shared her blood, but not her good intentions. Maya had mentioned her brother exactly once in that conversation that day. Only once. Very quickly. Almost in passing. My mother worked 4 jobs to raise me and my brother. She didn't say anything more about him. Didn't say his name. Didn't say where he was, what he did, or what kind of life he was living. That silence was an answer all by itself. But Dante didn't fully understand that answer until 3 days later, when the penthouse intercom rang one afternoon less than an hour after Maya had left. Building security called up. "There's a man here asking to see you, Mr. Ferraro. Says he's Miss Santos's brother." Dante was silent for 2 seconds. "Send him up." Jorge Santos stepped out of the private elevator and entered the penthouse with eyes that had already begun calculating before his mouth even opened. He was 33 years old, taller than Maya but thinner, carrying that restless energy of a man who was always in need of something from someone. His eyes swept across the living room, from the leather sofa to the painting on the wall, from the chandelier to the full view of Manhattan behind the glass, and Dante could see the math running through Jorge's head as clearly as words written on a board. Jorge sat down without waiting to be invited. He smiled, the kind of smile worn by someone trying to look friendly without having the material for it. "I know you've helped my sister. The hospital thing, the medicine money for the little girl, very generous. My family is very grateful." Dante sat across from him. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He only looked at him. "I'm going through a difficult stretch myself," Jorge continued, his voice dropping lower, more familiar, as though the two of them had known each other for years. "If you could help me with a small amount, my family would be very—" Dante cut him off, his voice calm, not cold but not warm. "I helped your sister because she works here, and I saw a specific situation. Her daughter needed medicine. I'm not in a position to help with other situations." Jorge didn't accept that. He leaned forward, changing angle. "I understand. Completely. But you know, it would look bad if people found out that a man like you was taking a special interest in the girl who cleans your home. People would think all kinds of things. You know how people talk." The room went quiet. The kind of silence that anyone with sense would recognize immediately as a signal to stop. But Jorge wasn't that kind of man. Dante stood. Slowly. He walked toward Jorge without hurry. Each step precise, counted. He stopped less than a foot away. Then he spoke. Very softly. So softly that Jorge had to tilt his head to hear him. And it was that very movement, that need to tilt his head, that made him understand he had just stepped into a place where he didn't belong. "You walked into my home, sat in my chair, and you just threatened me." Dante tilted his head slightly to one side, as though he were observing something small and unimportant. "Do you know what happened the last time someone did that?" Jorge went pale, not gradually, instantly, as if the blood drained from his face in a single heartbeat. He stood, said nothing else, walked to the elevator door, and didn't look back. When the elevator doors closed, Dante stood in the living room in silence for a moment. Then he called Tommy Russo. "Keep an eye on Jorge Santos. Find out who he owes, how much, and what kind of trouble he's in. Report back to me within 48 hours. 48 hours later, the report was on Dante's desk. Jorge Santos owed $45,000 in gambling debt to a loan shark group in Queens. That group had direct ties to Alejandro Varga's line. Dante read the name Varga and marked it in his mind. No reaction yet. No need. But it was noted. That same evening, before Maya could hear it from anyone else, Dante called her. He told her briefly, with nothing added and nothing taken away. "Your brother came here today. He asked for money. I refused. He wasn't happy. You should know before you hear it from someone else." Silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Maya's voice, small and heavy. I knew he'd do that. That's exactly why I was afraid to tell anyone about the hospital. You didn't do anything wrong, Dante said, his voice unchanged, though there was something beneath it now that he couldn't quite name. What your brother did doesn't change anything. The medicine is still paid for. The hospital stays the same. This has nothing to do with him. Maya was quiet for another moment. Then she spoke, very softly. Thank you. I hope that one day I'll be able to repay what you've done for us. Dante didn't answer that. He ended the call, set the phone down on the desk, looked out through the glass. Manhattan stretched below in the night, millions of lights, millions of stories, and he was standing here thinking about only one. But Jorge wasn't the greatest threat. There was a woman on the Upper East Side who knew everything and was watching from a distance with the patience of someone who wasn't in any hurry. She wasn't planning to frighten anyone. She was planning to destroy them. Vivian Ashford was 45 years old. Her hair always perfect, her clothes always the right label, her smile always placed exactly where it needed to be. She belonged to that kind of person who, the moment she walked into a room, made everything look as though it had been rearranged around her. That was the outside. The inside was something else entirely, a need for control that was never satisfied, a hunger that her husband's money couldn't fill. Her husband, Richard Ashford, 50 years old, had once been Dante's business associate in several real estate deals. A business relationship, nothing more. But Vivian wanted more. 2 years earlier, at a charity fundraiser on the Upper East Side, she had tried. Once. Clearly, she had stood beside Dante on the balcony, saying things whose meaning lived in the spaces between the words, and Dante had looked at her with eyes that held nothing except cold politeness, then walked away without saying a single word of refusal, because he didn't need to say it. The way he walked away was the answer. Vivian didn't forget. People like her never forgot. She put it away in a drawer inside her mind and waited. And now, the rumor had arrived. It came through the network of wealthy wives who used the same cleaning company as Maya. The story traveled from one coffee counter to another lunch table, carried in quiet voices filled with the sweet curiosity of people who lacked nothing except something to talk about. Dante Ferraro paid the hospital bills for his cleaning girl's daughter. $22,800. 6 months of treatment. And word was, she had even brought the child to the penthouse. Vivian heard it, and felt something she would call concern. But in truth, it was something else. Something deeper. Something uglier. It was humiliation. She, Vivian Ashford, born into an old Connecticut family, educated in private schools, taught how to hold a wine glass properly, how to set a table for 12, how to follow every rule of every club where money could buy a seat, had been rejected. And a cleaning girl from the Bronx was the one for whom Dante Ferraro had opened his wallet. She called Dante one afternoon. Her voice was sweet, warm, carefully false with concern. Dante, I'm calling as a friend. I need to tell you something because I feel it's my responsibility to say it. Dante answered briefly. Go ahead. That girl Maya Santos working for you. I've heard a few things that are rather troubling. She has a history of approaching wealthy men when they're vulnerable. She does it methodically, Dante. I know what I'm saying. Someone told me. And worse than that, there's a source saying she has ties to Alejandro Vargas' group. The name dropped into the call like a stone falling into still water. Alejandro Varga. It wasn't an unfamiliar name to Dante. That was the man who controlled the drug pipeline in the Bronx. The man Dante had kept a strategic distance from for years. Not because he was afraid, but because there had been no need to touch him. And now that name was being attached to Maya. Who told you that? Dante asked, his voice unchanged. Someone reliable. Someone who knows her well. I'm saying this because I'm worried about you, Dante. Thank you for calling, he said. Then he hung up. He set the phone down on the desk, looked at the wall across from him. He didn't believe Vivian. He never had, and he wasn't about to start now. But the name Varga was different. That name wasn't something to ignore in his world. In this world, suspicion wasn't an emotion. It was a survival instinct. And that instinct didn't care whether he liked it or not. It said only one word. Check. Dante picked up the phone and called Reed. I need you to verify something. About Maya Santos. Check every possible connection she may have to Alejandro Varga or anyone in his network. And while you're at it, I want you to dig into Vivian Ashford too. Everything. Reed didn't ask why. He never asked why. And while Dante waited for the answer, while his machinery turned to search for the truth, his coldness would become the sharpest blade cutting into Maya, sharper than any spoken words, because it came through silence, and silence leaves nothing to argue with. The next morning, Maya arrived at the penthouse on time, just like every other day, 7:15. She entered the code, stepped inside, set her bag down in its usual corner by the service entrance, changed her shoes, picked up her cleaning cloth, and began to work. Everything looked the same as it had for the past 8 months, but the air didn't. She felt it immediately, not with her eyes, but with something deeper, that instinct she had learned as a child. From the nights her father came home quieter than usual, from the evenings her mother cooked without singing, from the moments when the air in their South Bronx apartment turned heavy before something happened. Maya had grown up learning how to read the atmosphere in a room, and today, the atmosphere was different. Dante was home. She knew that because his shoes were on the rack and his coat was hanging on the hook, but he didn't appear in the hallway the way he had in recent weeks. There was no good morning from the direction of the study. No question about how Lily Rose was doing. The question he had started asking lately, naturally, without effort, as though it was simply something he wanted to know. Today there was nothing at all. She wiped down the kitchen, straightened the sofa cushions, vacuumed the living room. When she passed by the study, the door was open. She saw Dante sitting inside, his eyes on the screen, and he didn't look up. Not the kind of not seeing, the kind of seeing and choosing not to look. She kept working, but there was something else too. Tommy Russo was sitting in the living room. He didn't come here often. Maya had seen him a few times, always outside the door or downstairs in the lobby, never sitting inside. Today he was on the sofa, phone in his hand, but his eyes weren't on the phone. His eyes were on her, not openly, but watching. Maya knew what it felt like to be watched. She had lived in neighborhoods where being looked at for too long meant trouble. She said nothing, kept her head down and worked, wiped every pane of glass, straightened every book on the shelf. Her heart beat faster than usual, but her hands stayed steady. When she went to take out the trash through the service door, she looked down at the street through the hallway window and saw a black SUV parked across the road that she had never seen before. It could have been a coincidence. It could have been nothing of the sort. In the normal world, a car parked on the street meant nothing. But this wasn't the normal world. This was Dante Ferraro's penthouse, and Maya was smart enough to know that the things that happened around a man like him were never coincidences. She finished her work at 2:00 in the afternoon, packed up her supplies, changed back into her shoes, slung her bag over her shoulder. Before stepping into the elevator, she stopped at the study door. Dante was sitting there, still looking at the screen. "Has something happened, Mr. Ferraro?" she asked. He looked up, quickly, then looked away. "No, just busy." 3 words, flat voice, not entirely cold, but there was nothing in it for her to hold on to. She nodded. "Have a good afternoon, sir." Then she left. In the elevator, she stood alone, watching the floor numbers fall, and felt something familiar returning. The cold. Not the cold of weather. The cold of someone who had learned that, when life gave you something good, the safest thing was never to trust that it would stay. On the bus from Manhattan back to the Bronx, Maya sat in the back seat with Lily Rose in her lap. She had just picked her up from Rosa's place, and the little girl was playing with her mother's fingers, squeezing them, giggling over something that only a 2-year-old could possibly find funny. Maya looked at her daughter. She thought about the $22,800 that had been paid, about the handwritten card, about Dante's voice saying that what her brother had done changed nothing. Then she thought about today, about Tommy sitting in the living room watching her, about the SUV across the street, about the words just busy with nothing inside them. And she understood, not with proof, with bone, with skin, with 27 years of living in a world where every good thing came with a bill. That night, in the studio apartment in Hunts Point, Lily Rose had a breathing episode at 2 a.m. The wheezing cut through Maya's sleep like a blade. She jolted awake, fitted the medicine tube into the nebulizer, held the mask over her daughter's nose and mouth while Lily Rose cried and twisted, terrified eyes wide, tiny hands clutching at her mother's wrist. Maya held her with one hand, the machine with the other, and she sang, softly, in Spanish, the song her mother had once sung to her on the nights she was afraid, back in that South Bronx apartment, when gunshots echoed from outside, and her mother held her and whispered, "No pasa nada, mi amor, mama está aquí." Maya sang that same song to Lily Rose. In the dark. Alone. No one stood at the bedroom door to knock. No one called a doctor within 15 minutes. There was only her and her daughter, and the nebulizer, and the old song. The episode passed after 20 minutes. Lily Rose fell back asleep on her mother's chest, the mask still resting lightly over her nose. Maya couldn't fall asleep again. She sat against the wall, staring at the peeling ceiling, listening to mice running inside the walls, and thought that maybe she had been wrong to start hoping. But what Dante found in those hours wouldn't take him where he thought it would. It would take him to an entirely different truth, and that truth would force him to confront not Maya, but himself. Reed Calloway called back on the second day. He hadn't called sooner, because Reed never called until everything was certain. That was why Dante trusted him. In a world where people spoke before they knew, Reed knew before he spoke. The report arrived through encrypted email, and Dante opened it in the study at 11 o'clock that night, alone, with the laptop screen as the only light in the room. Part 1. On Maya Santos. No connection to Alejandro Varga. Not direct, not indirect, not through anyone at all. No history of approaching wealthy men, no police record, no sign whatsoever of anything Vivian had described. Instead, Reed found 5 former employers Maya had worked for over the past 3 years. All 5 confirmed the same thing. On time, honest, careful, worked as though the house belonged to her. One of them, an older woman in Park Slope, Brooklyn, had written a note in her response to the cleaning company, and Reed copied it word for word into the report. She left because her daughter was born prematurely and had to stay in the hospital for a long time. I held her position for 3 months. She refused, saying she didn't want to take money during the time she wasn't working. I've never met anyone like her. I'm sorry she never came back. Dante read that passage twice. Then he moved on to part 2. Vivian Ashford and Richard Ashford. And here, everything turned upside down. Richard Ashford had been secretly in contact with Alejandro Varga for the past 6 months. Not socially, business. Ashford was trying to open a private route through the port of Newark, the same channel Dante controlled, but with Dante cut out of it. He had used the communication channels already available from his former partnership with Dante to reach contacts at the port, then shifted toward Varga to replace both supply and protection. That was betrayal. Pure, precise, deliberate. And Vivian knew. Not only did she know, she helped. The call slandering Maya wasn't the impulsive act of a jealous woman. It was a tactic, a distraction. It was meant to make Dante focus on the cleaning girl inside his own home, instead of seeing the knife being driven into his back through the port of Newark. But Reed found another layer too. This one was deeper, dirtier, and it connected to a name Maya had tried to forget. Derek Molina, Lily Rose's father. The man who had walked away with 4 words, "I'm not ready." Reed traced Derek to Atlantic City, where he was now working for Richard Ashford. Not a coincidence. Ashford found Derek through gambling circles, the same network Jorge Santos was drowning in. Jorge owed money. Jorge talked too much when he was drunk. Jorge carelessly mentioned his sister, the wealthy boss, the hospital money. The information flowed from Jorge's mouth to the ears of the lenders, from the lenders to Varga's network, from Varga's network to Ashford. And Ashford picked up Derek Molina the way someone picks up a cheap chess piece, paid off his gambling debt, and in return Derek was willing to serve as a false witness if needed, willing to say anything at all about Maya to support Ashford's plan. A backup card, cheap, dirty, and ready. Dante read the entire report. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time he read it, the picture became clearer, and each time it became clearer, the thing tightening in his chest pulled harder. He closed the laptop. The study fell into darkness. Manhattan was still shining beyond the glass, millions of lights knowing nothing about what was happening inside this room. He sat there, in the dark, and he thought about yesterday, about the way he hadn't looked up when Maya walked past, about the words just busy that he had tossed at her the way someone tosses a coin onto the sidewalk, about the way Tommy had sat in the living room, watching her as though she were a suspect. He thought about Maya's eyes when she asked, "Has something happened?" He had seen something in them he didn't want to admit. Not fear. Preparation. She had prepared herself to lose the very thing she had just been given. She had prepared for it because she had already lost too many times before. And he, Dante Ferraro, the man no one on these streets would ever dare turn their back on, had almost turned his back on the only girl in 8 months who had dared to tell him the truth. He had given orders that destroyed other men's business empires without losing a minute of sleep. He had sat across from the most dangerous men in this city without blinking. But tonight, in the darkened study, he couldn't sleep, not because of Ashford, not because of Varga, but because he had almost become one more name on the long list of people who had turned away from Maya Santos. Dante didn't sleep that night, but by 5 o'clock in the morning he was already sitting at his desk, phone in hand, beginning to do what he did best. Act. In Dante Ferraro's world, apologies didn't come before action. Action came first. Words came later, if they were needed at all. The first call, at 5:15 in the morning, was to his private attorney. Dante's voice was calm, clear, each sentence a command. Cut every business tie with Richard Ashford, every joint deal, every contract, every verbal agreement. End it. I want the formal notice on Ashford's desk before noon today. The stated reason in the notice is material breach of trust. Along with that, he sent his lawyer all the evidence Reed had gathered on the Newark port operation, on the connection between Ashford and Alejandro Varga, on the plan to open a private route and cut Dante out, not to sue. In this world, people didn't sue each other. Evidence existed so Ashford would know that Dante knew. And in this world, when the other side knew that you knew, the game was over. The second call was to Tommy Russo, Atlantic City. Derek Molina. Find him. Don't do anything to him. Just meet him and make it very clear that if he comes within 100 miles of Maya Santos or her daughter, his life will change in ways he won't like. Tommy Russo didn't ask another question. He was on the road to Atlantic City before 8 o'clock that morning. Before noon, Tommy called back. Done. He understands. He won't come back. Dante knew Tommy didn't need to explain further, and Derek Molina, the man who had abandoned a pregnant girl with 4 words in a text message, wasn't the kind of man who had enough spine to stand against anything truly frightening. He would disappear, and he disappeared. Before 2 o'clock that afternoon, the termination notice was on Richard Ashford's desk. The news spread through their circles faster than the internet. Dante Ferraro had cut Ashford off. No one knew exactly why, but everyone understood that when Dante cut someone loose, that person shouldn't waste time asking why. He should start counting what he had left. Done. Everything that needed doing had been done. And now came the harder part. The part Dante wasn't good at. The part that required words. Thursday. Maya came to the penthouse. She stepped inside, set her bag in the familiar corner, changed her shoes, and when she looked up, Dante was already standing in the hallway, waiting for her. She stopped, looked at him. In her eyes was the caution he himself had placed there 2 days earlier, and seeing it made something inside his chest tighten sharply. I need to apologize to you. Maya stood still, completely still. She didn't blink, didn't breathe harder, didn't react in any visible way. But Dante recognized that stillness as a reaction. It was the reaction of someone who didn't believe what she had just heard. In 8 months of working here, she had never once heard Dante Ferraro say the word sorry. No one had heard him say it. That word didn't exist in his vocabulary, didn't exist in his world, where apologizing meant admitting fault, and admitting fault meant weakness. And weakness was the kind of thing that got you killed, but he was saying it. To her. I heard a lie about you, he said, looking straight into her eyes. I didn't believe it, but I let it affect the way I treated you. You noticed, and I should have come to you directly instead of pulling away. That's my fault. Maya stood silent for a few more seconds. Then she said, her voice very soft, not angry, not sad, only tired, the kind of tired that belonged to someone who had lived through this too many times before. I noticed. I knew that same day. She paused. I thought this was just one more time. One more time what? One more time someone decided I didn't deserve the good thing that had just come into my life. The sentence hung in the air between them. Dante had no answer. Not because he couldn't find the words, because there weren't any words that were enough. There was no sentence he could say that would erase the 27 years Maya had spent living in a world that kept confirming to her that she didn't deserve anything good. He couldn't repair that with a sentence. He could only repair it by doing something different. From now on, he nodded, said nothing more. Maya said nothing more either. She looked at him for one more second, then gave a small nod, turned away, picked up her cloth, and started working, like every other day. But not exactly like every other day. Because today, for the first time, she didn't say Mr. Ferraro. She didn't say you the way she had before, either. She didn't call him by any title at all. She simply looked at him and spoke plainly, as if she were speaking to an equal. And Dante realized that it wasn't disrespect. It was something Maya gave very few people. Truth without a cover around it. But Dante didn't tell her the most dangerous part. He didn't tell her Derek was in Atlantic City. Didn't tell her Derek was working for Ashford. Didn't tell her Ashford had found Derek through Jorge's gambling circle. He didn't tell her because he knew there were truths that protected people, and truths that destroyed people. Knowing that her daughter's father was being paid to stand ready to lie about her, that was the kind of truth that destroyed. And Dante chose to keep that part in the dark, where it belonged, where Maya didn't need to see it. 1 week after the apology, late one afternoon when Maya had just finished working and was getting ready to leave, Dante called her into the study. He was standing beside the window, not sitting, and Maya understood at once that this wasn't a casual conversation. He had prepared for it. He went straight to the point, exactly the way he always did, without circling around, without opening with small talk, without softening anything. I need a full-time penthouse manager, not just cleaning, receiving deliveries from suppliers, supervising maintenance when I'm not here, arranging schedules for repairmen, managing household supplies, someone I trust. Here every day, Maya stood listening, her arms resting at her sides, not clenched, not folded over her chest. She was truly listening, not reacting yet. The salary is $5,500 a month, full health insurance, including for Lily Rose. The entire cost of medication, equipment, and follow-up appointments would be included in the policy. Maya blinked once when she heard that number. $5,500. She was making $3,200 from 3 different jobs, working from morning until late at night, with no days off, no insurance, and the number he had just said was nearly twice as much for only 1 job. Dante continued. On the floor below the penthouse, there's a separate room with its own entrance, its own bathroom, enough space for 2 people. That room has been empty for 3 years. You and Lily Rose can live there if you want. No rent. He stopped, looked at her. But this is a job offer. Not a favor. Not charity. I need someone, and I trust you. If you don't want it, if you don't feel comfortable, everything stays the same. The medication will still be paid for. The hospital will still be paid for. No conditions. It has nothing to do with whether you accept or not. Maya didn't answer right away. She looked at him, then around the room, then down at her hands. He could see that she was calculating. Not calculating money, calculating risk, calculating the price people would attach to her if she said yes, calculating the rumors that would move faster than the truth, calculating the way the world would look at a 27-year-old girl from the Bronx moving into the penthouse of a wealthy man. People will talk, she said softly. They already do, Dante answered, his voice not challenging, not arrogant, only simple truth. Maya nodded slowly. Give me a few days. She went back to the Bronx that afternoon. 5 days. For 5 days she came to the penthouse and worked as usual, never mentioning the offer, never asking another question, never giving any sign at all. Dante didn't ask either. He had finished his part. The rest was hers. On the 6th day, Maya arrived 15 minutes earlier than usual. She knocked on the study door even though it was already open. He looked up. I'll take it, Maya said, her voice clear, steady, without hesitation. But on one condition. Dante waited. I want this to be clear. I'm an employee. I work and you pay me for that work. I'm not here because of pity, not because of a favor, not because of any reason other than the fact that I'm capable of doing what you need, and you're paying me fairly for it. I don't want anyone to think otherwise. She paused for a beat, including you. Dante looked at her. She was standing straight, shoulders straight, eyes straight. Lily Rose wasn't here today. But Maya carried her daughter inside every decision she made, and she made this one with a dignity that 27 years of life hadn't managed to take from her no matter how hard they had tried. Dante said only one word. Agreed. 2 weeks later, Maya and Lily Rose moved into the room on the lower floor of the penthouse. The room was smaller than any room in the penthouse, but 3 times larger than the studio in Hunts Point. It had a window facing a narrow alley behind the building. Not a Manhattan view, but it got morning sunlight. And to Maya, Morning sunlight was already a luxury. On the first day, Lily Rose crawled all over the new room, touching everything, laughing at the white wall as though the wall were telling her jokes. Maya sat on the floor watching her daughter, and for the first time in a very long while, the room she was sitting in didn't have mice inside the walls. The penthouse changed from that day on, not in any grand way, not with parties or noise, only in small things. The sound of tiny footsteps on wooden floors, the babbling of a little voice early in the morning drifting up from downstairs, the laughter for no reason at all of a 2-year-old child discovering the world. The penthouse had been silent for 3 years. 3 years with nothing but the footsteps of one man living alone among rooms too large for a single person. And now it had the sound of a child. Dante didn't know when he began waiting for that sound every morning. He didn't know when he started waking up 10 minutes earlier, making coffee, standing in the kitchen, and listening to the babble rising from the staircase as though it were the sound this home had been missing for 3 years without his ever knowing it. But he had. 3 months passed, and the penthouse was no longer the same place. Not because the furniture had changed, not because the walls had been painted or the interior moved around, but because of the sound. Before, when Dante woke up, the first thing he heard was silence. The silence of cold wooden floors, of a kitchen with no one in it, of a cup of coffee made for only one person. Now the first thing he heard was Lily Rose. The sound of her babbling floated up from downstairs through the staircase. Her laughter with no clear reason, Maya's soft voice in Spanish speaking to her, "Vamos, mi amor, vamos," and the tiny footsteps across the floor, unsteady, falling, then unsteady again. Lily Rose was learning to walk, 2.5 years old, slower than other children because the first months of her life had been spent in an incubator and on a breathing machine instead of on the floor. But she was trying, every day, with the patience that only children who have had to fight before they even know what fighting is can have. One afternoon, Maya crouched in the middle of the living room, both arms open, calling to her daughter, "Come here, my love. Come to Mama." Lily Rose stood about 4 steps away from her, both hands lifted out to the sides for balance, wide eyes full of concentration, her whole body swaying like a tiny boat on water. She took 1 step, then 2, then tilted to the right, lost her balance, and dropped onto the floor, and laughed. Laughed as though falling were the best part of the game. Maya laughed with her, the kind of laughter meant only for a child, the kind of laughter Dante had never seen on her face anywhere else. Dante stood at the study door. He hadn't been invited. No one had called him. He had only heard the laughter and walked out, then stood there, leaning against the frame, watching. Lily Rose looked up after her fall, looked at her mother, then turned her head and saw Dante. She looked at him, then lifted her hand and pointed at him. One tiny finger stretched straight out, her mouth making some sound that wasn't a word and yet was clearly meant as a call. Dante walked into the living room. He sat down on the floor, a few steps away from Lily Rose. She turned toward him, wobbled in his direction. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, then fell forward and Dante caught her. His hands held her beneath the arms and lifted her gently, and Lily Rose fit into his hands, so light that for a second he almost forgot that a human being could weigh so little. She wriggled, lifted her face to look at him, then raised her small hand to his face. That little hand touched the scar, the faint scar running from his temple down to his left cheek, the thing adults noticed and avoided mentioning, the thing rivals saw and understood as a warning. But Lily Rose wasn't an adult. She didn't know fear. She touched the scar with the pure curiosity of a child, with soft fingers that didn't yet know this world held things one shouldn't touch. Then she patted it, lightly, as though soothing it. Dante smiled, not the smile he used in conference rooms, the kind calculated, measured, used like a tool. This was a different smile, a real one, a smile that came from somewhere he had thought was closed a long time ago. Maya watched the two of them from where she was crouched on the floor. She said nothing. She only looked, and in her eyes there was something that changed, gently, like a door opening a little wider without making a sound. Then there was another night. 3 in the morning. The wheezing cut through Maya's sleep the way it always did, but this time when she sat up and fitted the medicine tube into the nebulizer, the machine didn't work. She pressed the button. Nothing. Pressed it again. No light. She took it apart, put it back together, checked the power cord, checked the outlet. Nothing. The breathing machine had failed. Lily Rose was wheezing, each breath heavier than the one before, her eyes wide in the dark, terrified, her hand clutching at her mother's shirt. Maya didn't think. She picked her daughter up, ran up the stairs, ran down the upstairs hallway, and knocked on Dante's door. Hard, urgent. The door opened in 3 seconds. Dante stood there, instantly awake. The kind of awake that belonged to a man who had never truly slept deeply. The kind of awake that came from living in a world where a knock at 3 in the morning could mean anything. He looked at Maya, looked at Lily Rose in her arms, heard the sound of the child's breathing, and didn't ask a single question. He took his phone and called his private doctor. The doctor arrived in 15 minutes. During those 15 minutes, Dante, Maya, and Lily Rose sat on the floor of the living room, their backs against the wall. Lily Rose lay between them, her head on Maya's lap, her feet touching Dante's thigh. She was still wheezing, but less frightened now because her mother was here, and there was another person here too, someone she knew, the man with the scar she liked to touch. Maya sat still, eyes on her daughter, ears listening to every breath, and at some point during those 15 minutes, her hand rested on Dante's hand. She didn't realize she had done it. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't romantic. It was instinct. The instinct of someone who was afraid. The instinct to reach for something steady in the dark. And the nearest steady thing was his hand. Dante looked down, her hand on his, smaller, warmer, trembling a little. He didn't pull away. He didn't close his hand over hers. He simply left it there, let his hand remain where it was for her to hold on to. The doctor arrived, examined Lily Rose, replaced the nebulizer with the backup set Dante hadn't even known he had, until Reed bought one in advance on his orders the week before, and the little girl was all right. She fell asleep again on her mother's chest, right there on the living room floor, and Maya sat there, her back still against the wall, her eyes dry now but not closed. Dante sat beside her. Neither of them spoke. In the penthouse at 4 in the morning, with Manhattan sleeping quietly beyond the glass, the silence between them wasn't the empty kind. It was the kind of silence that only two people who had gone through a hard night together could understand. But there would be another night, out on the balcony, that would change everything between them. The night Dante told her what he hadn't told anyone in 5 years. That night came without warning, the way every important night in life seems to arrive without anyone planning for it. Lily Rose had been asleep since 9 o'clock, resting peacefully in her room on the lower floor. The penthouse was quiet. Maya sat on the upstairs balcony with a cup of tea, looking out at Manhattan stretched below her, millions of lights running all the way to the horizon. Dante stepped onto the balcony with a glass of wine and sat down in the chair beside her. He didn't ask whether he was bothering her. He didn't need to. The two of them had moved past the stage of asking each other questions like that a long time ago. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence they had both grown used to, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. Then Maya spoke softly, her eyes still on the city. "I want to ask you something, but if you don't want to answer, you don't have to." Dante turned to look at her. "Ask. The scar," Maya said, her gaze shifting from the city to his face, looking directly at the line that ran from his temple down to his left cheek. "Lily Rose touches it every day like it's the most ordinary thing in the world. But I've never asked." Dante didn't answer right away. He looked down at the wine in his hand, turned the glass slightly. The city lights shimmered across the surface. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Maya didn't rush him. She had lived with silence long enough to know that some silences need time, not pressure. Then Dante spoke. His voice was lower than usual. Not the voice he used to give orders. Not the voice he used in negotiations. It was the voice of a man opening a room he had kept locked for 5 years. "My sister's name was Isabella. She died at 23. 5 years ago." Maya said nothing. She only turned her body toward him, gently, letting him know she was here, that she was listening. Isabella was addicted. It started with painkillers after a car accident when she was 19. From painkillers to oxy, then to something heavier. I found out too late. When I found out, I did everything. The best rehab center, the best doctors. Money was never the problem. I thought money could fix it." Dante stopped, drew in a breath. "But I wasn't there. That's the thing money can't buy. I paid for everything, but I was never there. There was always a meeting, always a deal, always something more urgent than my own sister." He set the wine glass down. On the last night, Isabella called me. Her name lit up on my phone. I was in a meeting. I watched her name vibrating on the table and I thought, tomorrow. His voice didn't shake, but it was thinner now. Thin enough that Maya could hear what lay beneath it. The thing Dante had hidden under every order, every cold look, every ruthless decision for the past 5 years. There was no tomorrow. Isabella died of an overdose that night. Alone. In the apartment I paid the rent for, but had never stepped inside. He touched the scar, not unconsciously, but deliberately, like a man touching something that exists to remind him of what he is never allowed to forget. That night I punched the bathroom mirror. The glass cut my face. I didn't get stitches right away. I let it bleed, and when it healed, I kept the scar. Because I wanted to remember. Every morning when I look in the mirror, I want to remember that I said tomorrow to the person who needed me most, and no tomorrow ever came. The balcony fell silent. Manhattan was still glowing below them, but up here, on the highest floor, the space belonged to 2 people, and to the story Dante had just told for the first time in another person's hearing. He had carried it alone for 5 years. For 5 years it had lived beneath every decision he made, beneath every wall he built, beneath the reason he never let anyone get too close. And he had just told it to the girl from Hunts Point, the one whose name he hadn't even known 8 months ago. Maya didn't say I'm sorry for your loss. She didn't say it wasn't your fault. She didn't say any of the things people usually say when they don't know what to say. She said nothing at all. Instead, she lifted her hand, slowly, gently, and placed it on the scar on his face. The way Lily Rose had done, but different. Her fingers were warm, trembling just a little, resting on the line from his temple to his left cheek, the place no one had been allowed to touch for 5 years, the place partners saw and avoided, enemies saw and understood, and Dante saw every morning in the mirror and remembered. Maya touched it, and Dante closed his eyes. He didn't pull away, didn't stiffen, didn't flinch in self-defense. For the first time in 5 years, someone touched that wound, and he didn't retreat. He sat there with his eyes closed, his hands resting on his thighs, and let her touch the part of him that hurt the most without recoiling. They stayed that way for a while. No one knew how long. No one counted. Then Maya lowered her hand, gently, and the 2 of them turned back toward the city, each holding on to their own silence. But somehow the distance between their chairs had grown shorter than it had been before. But Dante Ferraro's world didn't allow softness. And out there, beyond the Manhattan lights, beyond the soundproof glass, someone was always watching. Vivian Ashford wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat. She had lost the deal, lost her husband's business relationship with Dante, lost her standing in the social network the moment word spread that Dante had cut Ashford off, the news racing through their circles like fire through dry grass. But instead of stepping back, she did what cornered people so often do. She escalated. Vivian knew that Richard still had a line of contact to Alejandro Varga from those months of secret cooperation. That channel hadn't been closed because Varga didn't care that Dante had severed Ashford. Varga only cared about information. And Vivienne had information. She forced Richard to call one of Varga's people. Richard hesitated. He knew he was walking a wire. Knew Dante already had proof of betrayal, and had simply not yet used it to its fullest extent. But Vivienne wouldn't let him retreat. She had lost too much. Humiliation had turned into something more dangerous. Something that no longer cared about consequences. The information Vivienne gave Varga was simple, precise, and deadly. Dante Ferraro has a weakness. A girl named Maya Santos and her little daughter are living inside his penthouse now. Lower floor. Private entrance. No personal security detail. In the underworld, information like that isn't gossip. It's a weapon. 3 days later, Maya took Lily Rose to Mount Sinai for a routine follow-up appointment. The visit went normally. Dr. Park said the little girl's lungs were improving well, and that they might be able to reduce the budesonide dose next month. Maya carried her daughter out of the hospital, got into a taxi back to Tribeca, and on the way home, at the corner of 97 and Madison, she looked through the back window and saw a black sedan following them. She looked again. The car was still there, keeping a distance of 2 cars, not passing, not turning, simply following. Maya knew what it meant to be followed. She had grown up in the South Bronx. She knew the difference between coincidence and intent. This was intent. She took out her phone and called Dante. He answered before the first full ring had finished. "There's a car following me," Maya said, her voice trying to stay calm. though he could hear that her breathing was faster than usual. And in that instant, Dante's voice changed. Maya had heard many versions of Dante's voice over the past months. The calm voice he used with her, the warm one when he played with Lily Rose, the low voice on the balcony the night he told her about Isabella. But this voice she had never heard before. It was sharp, cold, exact. There was nothing left in it of the man who had sat on the floor at 3 a.m, letting her hold his hand in the dark. This was a different voice. Boss Ferraro's voice. Where are you? Exact location. Corner of 97 and Madison. In a taxi. Don't get out of the car. Don't look back again. Tommy Russo is coming. He hung up. Maya pulled Lily Rose tighter against her chest. The little girl was asleep, knowing nothing. The taxi kept moving. The black sedan remained behind them. 3 minutes later, 2 black SUVs appeared from opposite directions and cut in between Maya's taxi and the sedan. Fast, precise, professional. Tommy Russo stepped out of the lead SUV, opened the taxi door, and moved Maya and Lily Rose into his vehicle. The black sedan stopped for a second, then turned and disappeared into Manhattan traffic. Tommy didn't chase it. He didn't need to. He had captured the plate the moment the sedan appeared on the dash camera. That plate was on Dante's desk within an hour. The car was a rental, rented under a false name, but the rental company had ties to one of Varga's secondary operations in Queens. The circle closed. Vivian, Richard, Varga, the sedan, all of it linked together by threads that Reed and Tommy needed less than a day to trace. 48 hours later, Dante ended everything. No noise, no public violence. True to Ferraro style, it was precise, surgical, and left behind no trace a newspaper could ever find. Richard Ashford received a call from Dante's attorney, along with copies of the full body of evidence about his connection to Varga, the port operation, the use of Derek Molina, the passing of Maya's location to Varga's people. A second copy was sent to the FBI through an anonymous channel. The Newark port operation was completely frozen. At the same time, a message was delivered to Alejandro Varga, not by phone, not through a middleman, through the kind of channel that everyone in that world understood. The message was very short. Maya Santos and her daughter are under the protection of the Ferraro family. Touch them, and it means war. Varga understood. Varga wasn't a fool. A cleaning girl and a little child weren't worth starting a war with Dante Ferraro. He pulled back. And Vivian Ashford, the woman with the always perfect hair and the always perfectly placed smile, watched her world collapse in 48 hours. The joint accounts were frozen under federal investigation. The social network turned its back on her because no one wanted to stand beside someone Dante Ferraro had marked. Richard didn't dare leave the apartment, and within a month, the Ashfords left New York. No one asked where they went. No one cared. In this world, when you lose, you disappear. That was the rule. After Vivian and Richard disappeared from New York, one loose end remained that Dante couldn't ignore: Jorge Santos. Not because Jorge was dangerous. Jorge wasn't dangerous to anyone except himself. But his $45,000 debt was owed to a loan shark group with direct ties to Alejandro Varga's network. And in this world, debt wasn't just money. Debt was a cord. The man who owed money became the man who owed favors. The man who owed favors became the man who had to obey. And Jorge, with his loose mouth when he was drunk, and his habit of selling anything he could to put money on the gambling table, was a security breach leading straight to Maya. Dante didn't pay Jorge's debt out of kindness. He paid it because it was a tactical decision. $45,000 to close a breach. In his world of business, that was a number so small it wasn't even worth writing into the books. Tommy Russo met Jorge in Queens, in a bar where Jorge liked to sit. The meeting was short. Tommy didn't threaten him. He didn't need to. He simply placed an envelope and a one-way plane ticket to Miami in front of him. "Your debt has been paid. All of it," Tommy said. "In exchange, you leave New York. No contact with Maya unless she wants to contact you first. No coming back. No calling Rosa to ask for money. No showing up anywhere near her life. You start over somewhere else. This is your only chance." Jorge looked at the envelope, looked at the ticket, looked at Tommy. He didn't ask who had paid. He knew. And he knew that when Dante Ferraro said only chance, it really was the only chance. Jorge took the envelope, took the ticket, stood up, and walked out of the bar without looking back. He flew to Miami the next day. He didn't call Maya, didn't call Rosa. didn't call anyone. Maya learned about it a week later, when Rosa told her that Jorge had gone to Florida and hadn't contacted anyone again. Maya didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. She had already learned enough about the way Dante's world worked to know that some things were handled in ways she didn't need to see, only needed to know they had been handled. She stood by the window in her room looking out at the alley behind the building, afternoon sunlight pouring across the glass, and said to herself, softly, like she was reciting a lesson that had taken her 27 years to fully understand. Family isn't the people who share your blood, it's the people who stay. 2 weeks after that, Rosa moved into the penthouse. Dante arranged it, but he didn't do it without asking Maya first. He asked. He told her that the room next to hers and Lily Rose's was still empty, that Rosa was living alone in the Bronx with eyesight that was getting worse and diabetes that wasn't being properly monitored, and that if Maya agreed, he would arrange a private doctor for her. Maya agreed. Not immediately. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she nodded. Rosa moved in with one small suitcase and a photograph of her husband that she placed on the bedside table. On the first day, she walked through the penthouse, touching everything with the hands of someone who had spent her whole life in rooms much smaller than these, her eyes moving over everything with both wonder and caution, as though she was afraid the things in this place might break if she touched them too firmly. Dante arranged for an endocrinologist to come examine her at home, adjusted her diabetes medication, and scheduled an eye appointment for her at a specialist clinic in Midtown. He did all of that through Reed, without saying much, without needing gratitude, the way he did everything, quietly, precisely, efficiently. But Rosa wasn't the kind of woman who let something pass without speaking of it. One evening, when Dante passed through the kitchen, she was sitting there with a cup of tea, Lily Rose asleep in her lap. She looked at Dante and called him over with a small wave of her hand. He stopped. She took his hand. Her two small, wrinkled, warm hands held his with the strength of a woman who had lived 63 years and knew exactly when to hold on tight. She looked straight into his eyes and said in Spanish, her voice slow and clear, carrying the weight of a prayer, "Que Dios te bendiga, mijo." Dante didn't understand. He looked over at Maya, who was standing in the kitchen doorway. She translated, her voice soft, her eyes wet but not crying. She says, "May God bless you, son." Dante nodded. He didn't say anything. But he didn't pull his hand away from hers. He let her hold it, and she held on a little longer, as though she were passing something into him that she believed he needed, something no money or power in the world could buy. And the penthouse that had once been cold as a mirror, the place where one man's footsteps had echoed through silence for 3 years, now held the laughter of 3 generations. Almost a year after Rosa moved in, an ordinary night. There was nothing special about that night, no event, no anniversary, no reason to remember it, and maybe, because of that, it became the most unforgettable night of all. Lily Rose had been asleep since 8 o'clock, her breathing steady through the new machine she now needed only at night instead of all day, and Dr. Park had said that if her progress continued like this, in another 6 months she might not need the machine at all. Rosa was asleep in the next room, her cup of tea on the bedside table, her husband's photograph still in its usual place. The penthouse was quiet. Maya sat on the upstairs balcony with a cup of tea in her hands, in her familiar spot, the chair that now held an indentation shaped exactly like her. Dante stepped out with a glass of wine and sat in the chair beside her, the chair no one else ever used but him. Manhattan stretched below them. Millions of lights, millions of stories. But on this balcony, there was only one story, and it belonged to 2 people. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence they had built over many months, the kind that didn't need to be filled, wasn't awkward, didn't wait for someone to break it. A good silence. Then Dante spoke, his eyes on the city, his voice low and slow, as though he were speaking more to himself than to her. "For 3 years I lived here alone. I thought that was strength. Alone meant no one could get to me. No one could hurt me. No one could become a weakness. I built this penthouse like a fortress, and I thought living alone inside a fortress meant I was strong." He stopped, took a sip of wine. "It turns out it was only emptiness, not strength. Just emptiness that I gave a different name because that made it easier to live with." Maya looked at him. He was still looking at the city, but she knew he was speaking to her, opening another door, a door that each time he opened it, he opened more slowly, more carefully, because he had lived too long behind closed doors. "I know who you are out there," Maya said, her voice calm and soft, without judgment, without fear. I know how the world out there sees you. I know the weight your name carries. I know there are rooms you walk into where people fall silent, and there are decisions you make that I never ask about. I know all of that. She turned to look at him. And I choose to stay. Dante looked at her. In his eyes was something Maya had seen a few times over the past months, each time a little clearer, each time a little closer. Not desire, not possession, but the quiet gratitude of a man who had grown used to having no one, and now had someone here, and was afraid that if he spoke it aloud, it would disappear. They didn't kiss that night. Not yet. The love between them came slowly, the way real things always do, without rushing, without forcing, not like a movie. It came in the mornings when Dante made coffee for 2 instead of 1. In the evenings, when Maya left part of dinner for him, even when he hadn't asked. In the way Lily Rose started calling him with a sound that grew more and more like the word da. And he pretended not to notice, but every time he heard it, the corner of his mouth twitched. In the way Rosa knitted him a scarf that he never wore outside but always kept draped over the back of the chair in his study. 1 year later, an afternoon on the penthouse rooftop, the sunlight was falling, golden and warm, the kind of late-day light Manhattan rarely gives away for free. Lily Rose was running across the rooftop, 3.5 years old now, her little legs steady, her lungs stronger now than any doctor had dared predict on the day she lay in the incubator weighing less than 1 kilogram. She ran around Maya's legs, around Dante's legs, laughing. That clear, bright laugh cutting through the noise of the city below, as though that sound were made of a different material, lighter, cleaner, belonging to somewhere higher. Dante stood in front of Maya. He took a small box from the pocket of his suit jacket. Just a small one. Not a red velvet movie box. A simple black box, and inside it was a silver ring. No large diamond. Nothing showy, because Dante knew Maya wouldn't wear anything that didn't feel like it belonged to her. He opened the box. Maya looked at the ring, then at him. He began to say something. Maybe the sentence he had prepared. Maybe the sentence he had rehearsed in his head many times. But he didn't get to finish it. Maya said yes, before he could place the final period at the end of the sentence. She said it clearly, without trembling, without crying, in the voice of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and had waited long enough. Dante smiled. A real smile. The smile Lily Rose had first pulled out of him on the living room floor. The smile that now belonged partly to Maya, too. Lily Rose ran over and wrapped herself around both of their legs at once, not understanding what was happening, but understanding that the air felt happy and wanting a part of it. They got married. Not a big wedding, not a wedding for newspapers. A small wedding, on this very rooftop, with Rosa sitting in the front row, Lily Rose carrying flowers, Franco standing behind Dante, the way he had stood behind him for 20 years, and Reed standing off to one side, his eyes watching everything as always. But today there was something softer in them than usual. And they lived in love. Not perfect love. Not love without shadows. Dante was still Dante, and his world was still a world Maya didn't ask about, and he didn't explain. But when he came home, when the elevator doors opened, and Lily Rose's voice echoed toward him, when Maya looked at him from the other side of the kitchen with the eyes of someone who knew everything and still chose to stay, those shadows became smaller. They didn't disappear, but they became smaller, and sometimes smaller is enough. The end. The story ends here, but before we stop, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been Maya? Have you ever carried a burden no one knew about? Gone to work every day? Smiled at people? Said I'm fine while everything inside you was breaking? Have you ever stood in a room full of people and felt invisible? Or were you Dante? Having everything and still missing the only thing that truly mattered? Building walls around yourself and calling it strength, when in truth it was only loneliness wearing a suit? This story isn't only about love. It's about dignity, about seeing the person beside you before it's too late, about the way kindness sometimes only needs to begin with one small act at the right moment. If this story touched you, share it with someone you think needs to hear it, because sometimes a story arriving at the right time can change the way someone sees their own life. Please like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories every day. I really want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me how you felt after this story, which moment touched you the most. And if you have a similar story in your real life, share it, because I read every comment and every one of your stories has value. I wish all of you watching this video very good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and love. Goodbye, everyone. See you in the next video.